From control to care, a Buddha reflection. I used to believe that if I pushed myself harder, I would finally feel at peace. But what if that pressure is the very thing keeping you stuck? The more I tried to control who I was, the more distant I felt from myself. Have you ever felt that quiet exhaustion too? Slowly, I began to notice a different way. One that doesn't demand force, but gently invites care. The quiet weight you carry. I want to begin with something simple, something you already know but rarely pause to feel. There are moments when you speak to yourself in a way you would never speak to another human being. A small mistake, a forgotten task, a hesitation, and something tightens inside. The voice comes quickly, almost automatically. It says you should be better. It says you are falling behind. It says you are not enough. The Buddha once observed this same movement in the human mind. Not as a flaw, but as a pattern. A learned reflex of grasping at an image of how things should be. And in that grasping, a subtle violence begins. Not loud, not visible, but constant. You try to shape yourself into an idea, and in doing so, you lose contact with what is actually here. If you stay with this for a moment, you may notice something. The tension is not coming from the mistake itself. It is coming from the comparison. From the silent measurement against an imagined standard that keeps shifting just out of reach. The shape of inner pressure. You move through your day carrying this invisible scale. It weighs your actions, your words, your progress, and no matter what you place on it, it rarely feels sufficient. Even success becomes fragile because it must be maintained, defended, repeated. The Buddha pointed not to success or failure, but to the strain created by clinging. When the mind holds tightly to an outcome or to an identity, it begins to contract. You feel it in the body as restlessness, in the chest as pressure, in the thoughts as urgency. It is like holding water in your hands and squeezing tighter to keep it from slipping away. The tighter you hold, the faster it escapes. And still, the instinct is to tighten more. This is how pressure sustains itself. Not because life demands it, but because the mind believes control will bring safety. Listening instead of forcing. Peace is not found by controlling the mind, but by understanding its movement. There is another way of relating to this pressure, one the Buddha quietly revealed through observation. Instead of asking what you should be doing, you begin to ask something softer. What is needed right now? This question changes the direction of attention. It moves you from performance into presence. From judgment into listening, and at first, this can feel unfamiliar, even uncomfortable. The voice of pressure is loud and immediate. The voice of inner wisdom is quiet, almost easy to overlook. But if you pause, even briefly, you may notice small signals. Fatigue asking for rest. Confusion asking for clarity. Emotion asking to be felt rather than fixed. These signals are not obstacles, they are guidance, and when you begin to listen, something in you softens. The need to force begins to loosen. The language of the mind. The way you speak to yourself shapes the world you live in. Harsh words do not stay in thought, they echo in the body. They create a sense of threat, as if something is always about to go wrong. The Buddha saw clearly that suffering is not only in events, but in interpretation, in the meaning the mind assigns. When a mistake happens, one voice says, this proves something is wrong with you. Another voice says, this shows where support is needed. Both arise in the same mind, but they lead to very different worlds. One collapses possibility, the other opens it. If you listen closely, you may begin to hear the difference not just in words, but in tone. One is sharp, urgent, demanding. The other is steady, patient, grounded. And over time, the voice you respond to becomes the world you inhabit. Discipline without harm. There is often a fear that without harshness, you will lose direction. That if you are kind to yourself, you will become passive or unfocused. But this fear comes from a misunderstanding of discipline. The Buddha's way was never about force. It was about alignment. Right effort does not mean pushing harder. It means moving in a way that reduces unnecessary strain. When discipline is driven by shame, it feels heavy. You act to prove something, to fix something, to become worthy. But when discipline is guided by care, it feels different. You act because something matters, because life is asking for a response. This shift is subtle but profound. Effort remains, but the tension changes. It becomes sustainable, like walking with awareness instead of running from fear. The space where rest appears. When grasping softens, space reveals itself as peace. At first, the absence of pressure can feel strange, almost like something is missing. The mind is used to noise, to urgency, to constant correction. Without it, there is a kind of quiet that feels unfamiliar. But this quiet is not emptiness in the way the mind fears. It is space. And in that space, something new becomes possible. Rest without guilt. Play without justification. Effort without exhaustion. The Buddha recognized this space not as something to create, but something that appears when clinging loosens. You do not have to force it into existence. You only need to stop tightening around what is already happening. Returning to the body. When you stop overriding yourself, you begin to feel again. Not in a dramatic way, but in simple, grounded signals. Hunger, fatigue, tension, warmth. These become guides rather than inconveniences. The Buddha often returned attention to the body, not as an escape, but as a way of seeing clearly. The body does not lie. It reflects the state of the mind with quiet honesty. When you listen, trust begins to grow. And with trust, the need for control begins to fade. You no longer need to dominate yourself to stay on track. You begin to move with yourself rather than against yourself. This movement feels less like effort and more like cooperation. Learning without blame. Each time you respond to difficulty with care instead of punishment, something shifts. A new pattern begins to form, not immediately, not perfectly, but steadily. The Buddha saw that patterns of mind are not fixed. They arise, repeat, and can soften when understood. When you make a mistake, it is no longer evidence of failure. It becomes information. A signal pointing toward what needs attention. Blame closes this process. It freezes learning, but understanding opens it. It allows adjustment, growth, and refinement. Over time, this changes your relationship with failure. It becomes less threatening, more informative, and with that, something in you relaxes. The balance of care and clarity. Wisdom walks between harshness and indulgence, steady and aware. There is a natural balance that begins to emerge when compassion leads. Standards do not disappear. They become clearer, more aligned with what truly matters. The Buddha's path was often described as a middle way. Not extreme control, not careless avoidance, but a steady, responsive way of being. In this balance, you act when action is needed. You rest when rest is needed. You adjust when conditions change. There is flexibility, not rigidity. And this flexibility is what allows growth to continue without breaking under pressure. When compassion becomes escape. As harshness softens, a new temptation can appear. The relief of self-acceptance can become so comforting that it begins to drift into avoidance. You may start to say everything is fine, even when something is not. You may call withdrawal peace or numbness acceptance. This is subtle, but important. The Buddha did not teach escape. He taught clear seeing. And clear seeing includes what is uncomfortable, what is unresolved, what asks for attention. Compassion is not turning away. It is turning toward, gently but honestly. Without this honesty, softness becomes another form of hiding. Staying present with what is difficult. There is a kind of tiredness that makes you want to let everything go. To stop trying, to stop engaging, to call it surrender. And sometimes, rest is truly needed. But sometimes, this letting go is not freedom. It is resignation. A quiet withdrawal from what feels too heavy to face. The Buddha's way of surrender was not passive. It was awake. It remained present with difficulty without adding resistance. This kind of presence requires energy, but not force. It is like sitting beside a storm without trying to stop it. You feel it, you see it, but you are not overwhelmed by it. Trust that sees clearly. True trust does not close the eyes, it opens them fully. Trust is often misunderstood as believing everything will be fine. But the Buddha's insight points somewhere deeper. Trust is the willingness to see life as it is, without distortion. Life includes beauty and harm, growth and loss, clarity and confusion. Trust does not deny this complexity. It learns to move within it. When you trust in this way, you do not ignore what is harmful. You recognize it. You respond to it. You protect what needs protection. This is not a contradiction. It is clarity in action. Boundaries is care. Boundaries are often mistaken for control, but they arise from understanding. From recognizing where you end and another begins. The Buddha's teaching does not ask you to tolerate harm. It asks you to see clearly. And sometimes, clear seeing leads to stepping back, to saying no, to creating distance. This is not rejection. It is care. Care for what is vulnerable, both in yourself and in others. When boundaries are held with awareness, they do not harden the heart. They protect it, allowing it to remain open without being overwhelmed. Effort without force. As understanding deepens, effort does not disappear. It changes in quality. You still act, still respond, still engage, but the force behind action softens. The Buddha described this as a kind of right effort. Not driven by fear, not fueled by self-judgment, but guided by clarity. You begin to act because something is needed, not because you are trying to control the outcome. This makes effort lighter, more precise, more sustainable. It is like adjusting a sail instead of fighting the wind. You work with conditions, not against them. the quiet freedom of understanding. Freedom is not in changing the world, but in seeing it without distortion. As all of this settles, something subtle becomes clear. The tension you carried was never only about what was happening. It was about how tightly you held it. When that grip loosens, even slightly, space appears. Not perfect, not permanent, but real. In that space, you begin to feel a different kind of strength. Not rigid, not defensive, but steady. You are still learning, still changing, still meeting life as it unfolds. But you are no longer fighting yourself in the process. And in that, something long strained begins to rest. This is Buddha Reflections, where philosophy, insight, and lived experience meet to explore mind, impermanence, and release. Thanks for your time. It's been a delight. What should we explore next? Comment, share, and save your insight. Subscribe to Orbital Dharma and keep your thoughts bright.